everyone. Welcome. It's great to see so many folks out tonight here at the zoo. I'm Lee Emke, the director of the Minnesota Zoo. It's been my great privilege to be director of the zoo for 14 years now, which is still kind of mind-boggling. And I see a lot of familiar faces here, and I know that many of you are here as zoo members, as volunteers, as zoo donors and supporters of our institution. So the first thing I want to say is just thank you for all your support, and thank you for coming tonight. Again, we cannot do this work without you, so give yourself a round of applause. And for those of you who are here for the first time, or maybe for the first time in many years at the Minnesota Zoo, I hope you all know now and or remember what an amazing place this is year-round. Coldest day in Minnesota, you can still come here and be in 75 degrees in the tropics and remember what green, the color green and humidity and things like that are all about in our Tropics Trail just outside. And then of course we've got the beautiful Minnesota Trail just behind me, which year-round is just a great celebration of the wildlife and wild places of this amazing state. You know, I also want to thank the state of Minnesota for the series that this is part of. The speaker series has been sponsored for a couple of years now by the Clean Water, Land and Legacy Amendment that the wisdom of Minnesota voters passed back in 2008. It's providing, including this terrific speaker series. And you know, there's lots of ways that the state helps out, but again, I keep coming back to the fact that we're a public-private partnership. This works because the state's involved, but because individuals like yourselves and many of the companies here in Minnesota, including Target, this is the Target Learning Center that we're in, all contribute together to make this institution what it is. And I hope, you know, if you haven't had a chance to consider making a gift to the zoo, that might be something you do in this season of giving. So now I'd like to move on to the reason we're all here. I'm very pleased to introduce you to Mr. Ron Schara, Minnesota's outdoor spokesman extraordinaire. And before I came to the Minnesota Zoo, I actually lived in California and then later in New York City. But since I've come here, it's certainly the voice of Ron Schara. When I hear that, I know I'm in Minnesota, and I know that I'm celebrating, you know, the wonders of the natural world that exist here in this state. We're really defined by our connections to nature in Minnesota, and Ron's been a great spokesperson for that for many years. Ron's been sharing stories about the connections between people and nature for many years through his Emmy Award-winning TV show, Minnesota Bound. We were talking beforehand that the Minnesota Zoo has been the subject of a few of those Minnesota Bound episodes, but it's been a few years and we need to get a couple more going. And clearly that's our fault. Apparently we have some great stories about Minnesota conservation, our work with prairie butterflies, our work with bison, our work with moose, all of which I think hopefully Ron will have a chance to share with a much bigger audience. But in the meantime, I think you all know that you know, we partner with animals here at the zoo, and Ron has certainly made a partner of an animal that we all know and love here in Minnesota. Wasn't able to make an appearance tonight, but you'll be hearing some stories, I'm sure. So please help me welcome Ron Schara.
Thank you. I already know what all of you are thinking. Where in the hell's the dog? It's what I have lived with now for 20 years. People aren't happy to see me anymore. They want to see the dog. So I'll get it over with right away. I'm going to tell you how I came to be with a black lab wearing a red bandana on television. You're probably thinking I'm a marketing genius. That would not be true. I have, all of my adult life, I've had Labradors. I started with a Golden Retriever. It's a great breed of dog too. And I'm a bird hunter. and I also got into field trials. Well, if you go to a field trial, usually the labs are just outshining the golden retriever. So when I had a chance in college, because the price was cheap, I bought a flat-footed lab. He loved to retrieve, but he didn't have any brains. But other than that, but anyway, I've had labs all my adult life, so it wasn't unusual for me when we were shooting show number 1 for Minnesota Bound that I would have a lab in the house. It was a February day, it was cold. My labs are outside most of the summer, but February cold, and she was 6 months old. And so she was in the house, and her name was Raven. I named her Raven because as a puppy, well, one, I've always often named my labs after birds. After all, it's a kind of a bird dog. She was black and very smart. Well, one of the smartest black birds in nature is the raven. So I said, that's the perfect name. So I named her Raven. And she was, like I said, 6 months old in the house on a February day when we were going to shoot show number 1 on Minnesota Bound in what we call the wraps. This is where you see me on camera saying, hi, everybody, welcome to the show. Blah, 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 blah. We call that the wraps. So now we're trying to figure out, what should I be by a fireplace? Should I be, by the kitchen table with a big old mounted fish behind me, or what should it be? And we tried all those things. And my wife said, she was kind of standing in the background there. She said, why don't you have Raven sit next to you? And so we said, okay, let's try that. And so I had Raven sitting there, and the cameraman, Joe from Pittsburgh, said, that doesn't work. I go, what do you mean it doesn't work? That's a nice looking dog. He said, I know it's a nice looking dog. It doesn't work. You don't understand, Ron. To the TV camera, having a black dog sitting there is like having a pile of black blankets with a couple of eyes sticking out. Said, I can't put enough light on that dog. It absorbs it all. So then Joe says to me, is there something bright and colorful you can put on your dog? Joe's from Pittsburgh. And I'm thinking, the dumb bunny is from Pittsburgh. He thinks I dress up my hunting dogs. But I walked down the hall of the house, and there on the coat rack, I can still see it, was a red farmer's handkerchief. I don't know why it was there. I wasn't wearing a red farmer's. I think the good Lord put it there. I don't know. But I looked at it, and I said, maybe this will work. I put the red bandana on Raven and walked back out there. Joe looked at the dog, saw the red bandana, and said, hey, that's perfect. It's going to work. Well, little did we know, she became immediately the star of the show. So that's how it all started. A couple of years later, a good friend of mine, Jerry McInnes, who had a fishing show on ESPN for a long time, heard about Minnesota Bound and saw some episodes. I ran into him at the St. Paul Sports Show, and he says, send me some of the stuff you're doing. So I did. And he called me, he says, I love that storytelling. And he said, do you mind if I show it to the bigwigs at ESPN? I go, yeah, go ahead. So a couple weeks later, he called me back. He said, they love it. They want you to do a show for them. And we're going to call it Backroads with Ron and Raven. So now I'm sharing equal billing with that damn dog, see? But it's been quite a ride. And just as an aside, near Sleepy Eye, Minnesota, you're the last one. Near Sleepy Eye, Minnesota, there is a 700-acre wildlife area there called the Two Rivers Wildlife Area. And one reason it's there is that Pheasants Forever had a fundraising program to acquire wildlife areas in Minnesota. and build a wildlife area, they called it. And we got involved when the original Raven had puppies. I knew that would be a huge event because she was so popular. In fact, a lady here has one of her, where's it? There's one right there. Yeah, thank you. Now this Raven puppy is housebroken, and but we decided that we knew everybody would want one of these Raven, the real Raven puppy. Well, what are you going to do? So we had a little deal. You could enter with Care 11. You could enter your name for a drawing to acquire the Raven, to get the Raven puppy free. If you would like, you can make a donation to what we call Ravens Fund to build a wildlife area. 20-some thousand dollars came in, and $5.50. And then we sold these at the state fair for 20 bucks. And then Gander Mountain came and said, we'll sell these for 20 bucks, and for everyone we sell, we'll give Ravens Fund $5 a piece. They sold 10,000 of them. And the next thing you know, Raven, the dog, had raised in excess of $80,000. True story, true story. Pheasants Forever had 2 matching grants with the 80,000. The 80,000 turned into $250,000. That's how magic happens. And today there is that 700-acre wildlife area near CPI, Minnesota, open to bird hunting, deer hunting, bird watching. You can do everything, but you can't snowmobile or ATV there. You can go watch your navel, whatever you'd like to do. And there's a big sign there that says the two rivers, well, the two rivers, by the way, is the Plum Creek, where Laura Ingalls Wilder grew up, and the Cottonwood River. Those are the two rivers, how it got its name. And it was, the land came from a widow, it was a widow. Her husband loved to hunt, and he had this farm. A lot of it was natural prairie. She was a very willing seller. The 700 acres contiguous spot, very rare. And but there's a big sign there that says the Two Rivers Wildlife Area is here thanks to Pheasants Forever, Ducks Unlimited, Care 11, Gander Mountain, blah, 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 DNR, on, and Raven, the star of Minnesota Bound. Thanks, son. So Raven has remained the star for 20 years, and last year at the state fair, we have a cabin there at a place called the North Woods in the state fair. It's about as North Woods as Hennepin Avenue. And Raven is in a very shady spot on the side of this little cabin. She's got water, a cushy place to sit and shade. And I'm kind of over here trying to find some shade and a chair out of the way. People are filing by to stand there and just look at this dog. When a couple of ladies came by and they spotted me over there. So they come over and they say, oh, Mr. Schara, I bet you feel bad because nobody's coming over to say hello to you. They're all going to the dog. I said, ladies, you're right. They're all going to see the dog. But come over here, ladies. So they, what? I said, come over here. I said, you're right. They're all going to see the dog. But guess what? What? The checks come to me. True story. Critters I have known. I tell you what, there's a lot of stories, but I'm going to pick a few highlights. And I think there's a few lessons with some of the critters I've known, even pertaining to the role of zoos today, which really hasn't changed as far as I'm concerned. Introducing critters to people who don't get to meet them or see them. But for me, the light bulb went off for me When I was a student at Iowa State University taking fish and wildlife biology, and I had to take didn't have to, I wanted to take a course in ornithology. That's the study of birds. And we had a field trip one morning outside of Ames, and we have all binoculars, and the professor, we're all looking, and there in a tree is a bird I had never seen before, and it was absolutely beautiful. And we looked at it. I didn't know what it was, but the professor says, that is a rose-breasted grosbeak. I go, really? Is it just passing through? He said, no, they live here. I go, they live here. I live here, and I've never seen it before. That opened my eyes to the fact that there might be a lot of things I've never seen before. And so I better keep my eyes open. But because what a fascinating sight that was that morning of a rose-breasted grosbeak. And I will never forget the lesson it taught me about if you think you know everything about the natural world, you know nothing. There's a lot to learn out there. The next critter that amazed me was we were filming a story about the fascination of dandelions. I had a dandelion expert. It's a fascinating plant, by the way. It was brought over here intentionally, and it had a lot of great need. They used the plant a lot in Europe, and makes great tea, great wine, by the way. But while we were doing the story on dandelions, and he was deep fat frying some, cooking them. The heads, they're delicious. Anyway, that's not what I'm here to tell you. The dandelion guy says, "Oh, look at here." He showed me a plant there. He says, "See that spit there in the corner of a leaf?" I go, "Yeah." He says, "That's the spittle bug." I go, "Really? I never heard of that." And he says, "Yeah." He says, "Take your finger and pull some of the spit away," and there was a little worm in there. And that spittle bug survives by creating all that spit around him so that the birds don't find him. I thought that was very fascinating. So we did a little Minnesota Bound story on the spittle bug. And so sometime later, now that I know all about spittle bugs, I'm up in Alaska fishing, and I'm coming out of the lodge one morning, a bunch of different plants there that I probably didn't even know. And I'm looking around, and guess what I saw? A wad of spit. Spittle bugs are in Alaska too. I thought that was pretty impressive for a spittle bug. Well, I want you to know you're looking at the best squirrel hunter in Elmwood County, Iowa. And I'm not going to bore you with some of my skills as a squirrel hunter, except I'll just say this real quick. I did a Minnesota Bound story about squirrel hunting one time, and the next day I was at Carol Evan and Paul Majors, who was very intelligent and very popular anchor. Some of you remember him. Moved on to LA, but he saw me in the hall and he says, "Ron," he said, "that was an interesting story about squirrel hunting." I said, "Well, thank you." He says, I didn't know you could hunt them or eat them." I go, "Paul, your forefathers probably lived on squirrels." But it just, and he's very bright, but it told me just sometimes how far removed we are getting from our own ancestry and all that. But the reason I bring up the squirrel hunting is because when I was a teenager and I'm squirrel hunting, it was very rare to see a white-tailed deer in northeast Iowa, which today is a heaven for deer hunters. But back then in the 50s, you rarely saw a deer. And when you did, it was a very exciting moment because you all know how deer are equipped with great senses and everything else, and speed and camouflage, and you name it. So I was enthralled with white-tailed deer. Then I went off to Iowa State University and I decided I was never going to shoot a deer with a firearm until I was smart enough and good enough hunter to get one with a bow and arrow. I just challenged myself to that. One of the dumbest decisions I've ever made in my life. But I'm now at Iowa State and I have a buddy who was pretty good at hunting them, and so it is. And then I had another buddy who had never seen a deer in the wild, but he wanted to try bow hunting. So he and I, on the day before the Iowa bow season opened, were out doing some last minute scouting and putting up some tree stands, which back then were some wood steps you nailed into the tree with a board that you cut a crotch in each end, a V in each end, and you put down in the V of a tree. That was your seat. Now they got fancy ones, you know, all that. And we had just finished putting up the last deer stand where we thought we would be successful, and we're walking back towards the car. We come over this hill, and there, standing about 40 yards ahead of us, is a magnificent whitetail buck, standing there, whipping the hell out of a sapling. And he notices us, and he stands and stares at us. And I go, "We gotta stop here, because he'll run if we don't. We're gonna, just be real quiet here." Well, then the buck looked at us for a little bit, then he ignored us and whipped some more of that sapling, and then he walked a little bit, and then he stopped. Now, this is the first white-tailed deer my friend Jim has ever seen. He says to me, "Make him run." Usually that's not a problem. I said, "I'll make him run." So I started walking towards that deer. And to my amazement, the deer didn't run. He's just looking at me. And I'm looking at him. And there's an old barbed wire fence between us. And I look at him and I see something hanging from his antlers. I thought it was velvet. You know, they shed the velvet in September, October. But as I looked at it more, it was not velvet. It was a piece of rope. So then I thought, well, he's playing around with a hay bale or something. He got some twine or rope tangled on his antler. That's what I thought. And the next thing I know, this buck, still on the other side of this old fence, starts walking to me. I go, "Wow, this must be a pet deer." I mean, I'm totally confused. I've never seen a deer do this all my life. He walks up to me, slow motion, gets right across from me, and starts putting his head through the barbed wire fence very slowly. And Jim says, "You better watch out." And I go, "Yeah, I suppose. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on here. He thinks I got candy or something? I don't know." And he got his antlers hooked up on the barbed wire, and then he backed off again, and he put his head through again. And when that deer sensed that his antlers were free of the fence, he hit me like a bowling ball. I was lifted off the ground. Down the hill we went. Now I had a hammer in my hand because we used it to pound nails. And I took a couple of swings at him, but that didn't stop him. And into a tree we went, me first. And now I had a death grip on his antlers. And I'm telling you, it was a death grip. And I fell down on the ground, and the deer came down with me, and it seemed like eternity. I yelled to Jim for help. This is the first deer he's ever seen in his life. And it's now trying to kill his buddy. Jim came down, he had a hatchet. We used a hatchet to some branches, and he was afraid to do anything, but he took one whack at the deer without hitting me, and then I sensed the deer kind of struggling to get up, and I let go of the antlers. And the buck got up and bounded away maybe 50 yards and stopped and put his white tail up, which is what Jim wanted to see all the time. And he stopped there and kind of hung his head. And I said to Jim, I said, oh, I hope we didn't hurt him, did we? You didn't hurt him, did you? And he says, I don't think so, but look at you. Well, I'm covered with blood, but it's my blood. So I have my ears out here about 6 inches, and my shirt is torn open, and my stomach has been cut, and I have a big cut here on this arm. And by the way, if any of you doubt my story, I will show you the scar here. So we went back to the car, now very, very shook. This was near the Iowa's Boone, what is it, Boone something State Park. Boone River? I forget. And there was a wildlife exhibit there, managed by a guy named Ward Garrett, who in my summer, I worked at the wildlife exhibit a few times, telling him, you know, wearing my Iowa conservation suit and telling people about stuff. And in fact, Khrushchev's wolf that he gave to an Iowa farmer was the farmer, what's he going to do with a Russian wolf? So he gave him to the Iowa Wildlife Exhibit. I'm kind of losing my story here, but that wolf, hundreds and hundreds of people would file by him, and he wouldn't pay any attention. But if you walk by in an Iowa conservation shirt, he followed you all the way. He hated your guts. But anyway, that's how I knew Ward Garrett. And so it was dark by now. Time I knocked on Ward's door, and he flicked on the light, and he said, Ron. I said, yeah. I says, yeah. He said, I bet you saw a big deer down there today, didn't you? Because he knew we were hunting public land. I said, yeah. I said, I saw that big deer. He tried to kill me. Ward says, what? And we told him what happened. And he goes, oh my God. What had happened is this deer had been raised by a farmer. First year was okay. 2.5-year-old white-tailed buck now is rut time in October. His neck is swelling. He's got antlers, and he wants to butt heads with anything he can. And he was poking holes in the farmer's cows, and that did it for the farmer. So he called the Iowa Conservation Department and said, you got to come get this deer. So they came to get it and got it, looked at it, and they were going to butcher it and feed it to this wolf I was just telling you about. But they decided it's really a nice white-tailed buck. Let's just let him go in the woods, and maybe some hunter will get him and be happy. Well, when we told Ward the story, now he's very nervous. There's a state park just, a quarter of a mile down the road. And the next day is going to be a Saturday. There's going to be 100 school kids there. And he didn't know where this deer is going to go. He says, I want you back here early tomorrow morning, and I want you to take me to where all this happened. So we said, we will. So the next morning, Jim and I are going to go hunting. If this was the car, this is about as far away as I would go. Because I was convinced every deer in the woods was out to get me. That's true, too. I was mentally scarred, but I didn't realize it right then. Well, I did realize it right then. Anyway, word came out. We took him, showed him. You could see it all in the leaves. You could see the tree where we hit. You could see my blood. And then we walked over to where the deer stopped, and the deer had bled a little bit, too, but not much. and we couldn't, not enough to follow his trail. So anyway, Ward was convinced what happened, and 2 days later, well, after he called and went around and warned all the landowners that this deer might show up. The only home he knew was a farm. Sure enough, 2 days later, this farmer hears a commotion. There's a white-tailed buck out in his yard chasing his dog. He grabbed his rusty .22 and went out and dispatched that deer because he knew what was happening. And I have the antlers to this day. But I'll be very honest with you, it did scar me for, I didn't realize how many years that when it got dark, when I was deer hunting, I didn't care if I had a bow or rifle, I would get, I could feel my heart start beating a little faster. And if something moved out there, that made it even worse. And but I'm pretty much over it now. But the one time I remember the worst was I was walking on this trail. It's still dark in the morning, going out to my deer stand, and I'm going, and suddenly I hear over here, boom, 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 boom. What the hell is that? Boom, 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 boom. Sounded like he's getting closer. Getting closer. I never, in the dark, I don't walk with my deer rifle with a bullet in there. I have one maybe in the magazine, but not in the chamber. But I put one in the chamber. Not that I could see anything. And I stood there for a long time, and it was quiet for a long time, and I finally said, "Get the hell out of here!" It was a deer. Probably was a world record buck. I just scared away. But I'm over it. But that's, I forgot the best part. After we told Ward about the deal, I'm bleeding. My ear's injured. So we go back to campus to the, what do they call it? The emery? No, the infirmary. Isn't that what they call it? Yeah. So I walk in there. Here's this crusty old nurse. She's seen 1,000 students the last 2 weeks, mostly with bar fights, I suppose. And I walk in there, and she looks at me and says, "Oh, what happened to you?" I said, "I got attacked by a deer." She says, "Sure you did." There's no way I could convince her I was telling the truth. So that's a critter I'll never forget. Another critter I discovered after college. I went to work for the South Dakota Game and Fish Department. I was editor of their magazine, and out there in the Black Hills, one time with the deer and turkey biologist, I was introduced to the joys of the wild turkey. They weren't native in the Black Hills, but they were introduced there from New Mexico and Arizona, because the Black Hills is the world's largest stand of ponderosa pine, and the subspecies of turkey that's out there now developed in Arizona, where also has ponderosa pine. Anyway, little did I know, meeting the wild turkey, that it would become a lifelong passion of mine to not only hunt them, but I became a wild turkey activist. Minnesota, I think turkeys were native in Minnesota. Some people dispute that, but I have some writings by my great-great-grandmothers in Northeast Iowa, not very far from Rochester, Minnesota, who write extensively about the men going out and hunting for deer and wild turkeys and finding both. And that's just a little ways from Minnesota. And but anyway, when I came to Minnesota, there really weren't any wild turkeys. The last wild turkey reportedly was killed in like 1864 in Rock County, of all places. But Minnesota DNR was trying to play with some wild turkeys and putting them in the whitewater area with not a whole lot of luck. And then they got some birds from Nebraska that weren't really wild. And anyway, they kept trying and weren't working too good. And then they finally got some from Missouri. They traded Missouri for some true wild turkeys and traded them rough grouse. Missouri wanted to try to get more rough grouse. So we got wild turkeys down in Houston County. Well, I had now become a wild turkey passionate guy. And so I went in one day to the wildlife chief, Roger Holmes was his name, and I said, Roger, we can do more for wild turkeys in Minnesota. We can get these birds going. He said, I don't have a budget for it. My guys are so busy with other stuff. If you want wild turkeys, do it yourself. That's basically what he said. So in 1975, I formed the very first chapter of the Minnesota Wild Turkey Federation. We met in Red Wing, Minnesota at Nibo's Cafe because Bob Nibo was a friend of mine and I had introduced him to wild turkeys in the Black Hills, and so he was about as passionate as I was. And we raised a lot of money. And we started to fund DNR's turkey program. By funding that, we paid for the men to trap, and students to trap wild turkeys in the wintertime and move them to new habitat in southeast Minnesota. And we kept doing that as the birds would reproduce. It would trap wild ones and move them around. And so if you don't like wild turkeys in Edina, I'm the guy to blame. And I want it on my tombstone, here lies a turkey. So, but I'm very proud of that. And the turkey is an amazing critter. Amazing and everywhere. I don't know how much time, I don't know if I can take you on a turkey hunt or not, but how many have ever hunted wild turkeys? Right? Hardly anybody? Oh my God, maybe I better. I might say that for the last here, so you stay awake. But the turkey, I mean, you talk about a great conservation story in the state. The wild turkey is that, as is the return of bald eagles, etc. During the 20 years of filming for Minnesota Bound, here's the most unusual experience, in my estimation, we've had. The strangest animal story. Not one, not two, three, but 4 different stories about wild ruffed grouse coming out of the woods and chasing your lawnmower. Or there was one where the guy would pull up in his ATV and say something, and pretty soon here come this grouse out of the woods, hop up on the back of the four-wheeler, and they'd go for a ride. Serious. We had another one where this grouse liked the people in this house area next to the woods, and he was putting shingles on, and the grouse would fly up there and hang out with them. And then he chased their Ford car, leaving it down the driveway, which was the grouse's final mistake. But nevertheless, the first time I saw this was just a family outside of Hudson, Wisconsin that called and said, you got to see this. Because their kid would get on the riding lawnmower, drive around the lawnmower, and pretty soon out of the woods come this grouse, and he'd chase the lawnmower this way, and the lawnmower come back, he'd come back following it. It was crazy. And I don't know if there's any scientific explanation or not, except the best guess, I think, is the thump, thump, thump of the pistons attracts probably the male grouse because they're thump, 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 thump. I don't know, but bizarre behavior by ruffed grouse. Another critter that I truly love, I have about 7 wood duck houses in my backyard. I got 2 right on the side of the house, without my wife's approval. But that's because we did a story on Arnie the wood duck man one time. Arnie's down by Le Sueur. Arnie has like 50 wood duck houses. And I learned so much about Arnie because he would check them all. And he would learn how to, he designed his wood duck house so it would open on the side, just a little opening. And he put enough wood chips in there so it was right even. So when he opened it up, if the hen was in there, he would hold his hand up at the hole where she would enter. Well, then she'd look at that. In the meantime, he'd opened up here and he'd look like this, see? So she wouldn't get too nervous. Some would get nervous. Others didn't seem to care if he was there or not. But then when she's not there, he would go check all the eggs every day, count them, keep accurate records of all of them. And the neat thing about him, not only was he a wood duck nut, a duck hunting nut, but he played in the Mankato Symphony too. So you just don't judge anybody by anything. But he's the first one that showed me videos of not 1 or 2 hens fighting over the box, but 3. And it was common. I mean, they're all 3 of them are in there pecking at each other. But he said, it's kind of comical because it's almost always the original hen that was in there is the one that wins. But Arnie was fascinating because of his passion for wild critters, especially wood ducks. And he had them on the side of his house, and they weren't very high. He told me, he said, you don't have to put your wood duck house way up there. They don't care. He said, they put them on the side of the house. And if you need to, I mean, the trees work great too. But so I put a couple on the side of my house, and they're used every year. Another critter, I kept hearing about the migration of sandhill cranes on the Platte River in Nebraska. Anybody seen that? Amazing, huh? We got to Platte one afternoon, early in the afternoon, and we saw maybe 2 sandhill cranes over there, 4 over there, nothing, and the meadowlarks hanging. We shot some, with telephoto lens, we shot some nice meadowlarks doing the thing. Which, by the way, how many meadowlarks you seeing in Minnesota these days? Anyway, that evening, we went to a place that the Audubon Society was maintaining. They said, hang around because you'll see something here. Well, little did I know. As the sun was going down on the Platte River, and this is late March, the sky started to fill with sandhill cranes. And they started dropping into the river, which is only about 6 inches deep. It was like you just poured feathers in the river. It just filled the river with sandhill cranes. It was like a religious experience. I got to tell you, I've never seen anything like it all my life. But then my cameraman, Steve, they had a blind that you could stay in all night. So he took a sleeping bag, and he stayed in the blind all night. And then at sunrise, he opened up a little deal, and he had his camera there. And the sandhill cranes they're right this close, and they're doing all their courtship dances and everything else. He's getting all that, and then suddenly a golden eagle or a bald eagle, I don't know which, comes sailing over them, and they all lifted up at once, and we got that all on camera. If you've never seen it, go see it, because it's truly spectacular and still going on. And those cranes passing through Platte, South Dakota, or not, on the Platte River, Some of them will go to Alaska. Some will go to Siberia. And they've been doing this. They're one of the oldest birds that we know of, like 1,000,000 years or something like that. Another critter I'll never forget. I'm also a muskie nut. When I got up here, heard about muskies, started hanging out with some muskie fishermen, and I only share this with you because that truly is an interesting critter, muskies. But what fascinated me more as a writer is what that fish did to people. Oh my Lord. I saw grown men and women shaking, so nervous because they caught one. Or maybe shake if they saw one. And so I've never written a book before, but I decided if I got a call once, somebody from Chicago, book publisher, I don't know why, I said, you know, would you be interested in writing a book, and what would it be about? I go, I don't know. How about muskies? They said, yeah, that'll work. Well, muskies, I mean, I was so fascinated by what this fish did to people. And I was no expert, but that was my first book, and it actually was reviewed in the New York Times, so pretty good. I'm just about done, folks. How much have I? Oh, yeah, okay, I'm okay. I'm way over, aren't I? Yeah. Real quick. I can't, I got to share this with you. Among the things I've learned over the years is that people who care about critters or have a passion for them, like Ducks Unlimited people, Audubon, Pheasants Forever, groups that really are concerned about, maybe because this critter means something to their life. They are the people that get stuff done. Steelhead Association, they like to catch the steelhead out of Lake Superior, and they are up there doing stream improvement work, doing things because they care. They have a passion. And I've learned over the years, I mean, we have wonderful DNR workers, etc., but if you want to get something done or want something protected, if you have a passion for it, get involved, because that's the key. For example, and this, you know, we like to beat up on ourselves, but I'll just say this point blank. America has the greatest wildlife management program in the world. And don't ever forget that. We might have our issues, but we have the greatest program in the world. I have been to Africa. And let me tell you, a lot of people say, oh, you know, if they just wouldn't shoot those things over there, there'd be a lot of wildlife in Africa. Well, there's a lot of wildlife in Africa. But let me tell you something. Africa is going under the same pressures that we are. Agriculture invading, changing things. Industry changing things. More people changing things. Wildlife in Africa needs help like any place else, and it's not just quit hunting them and they'll all be fine. That's not going to do it. I was in South America, and they're clearing the forests in Brazil like crazy. Give them the land. If you clear it, they'll give it to you free. And I had a jaguar hunter guide say to me one day, says, what's going on in America? I said, what do you mean? He said, they don't want to allow anybody to hunt jaguar down here anymore. I go, well, people are concerned about the jaguar. Oh, we're concerned about the jaguar. Concerned, he says. My government's giving away the habitat where the jaguar lives. There's a lesson there too. I was tagging along with a Cape buffalo hunter in Africa. I didn't want to shoot one, but I was interested in filming it. I wanted to see how damn scared I could really be. Anyway, he shot a nice old bull, Cape Buffalo, and he paid $7,000 for the privilege. And he paid it to this landowner. And so I was chatting with the landowner. I said, the landowner also had acres and acres of pasture with Herefords. He could have been in South Dakota. Serious. But he had some woods, extensive woods, and he had the Cape Buffalo there. I said, why do you keep the Cape Buffalo around? He said, well, as long as somebody wants to hunt them and is willing to pay for the privilege of hunting them, I'll keep the Cape Buffalo. He said, if nobody wants to hunt them anymore, they'll be gone, because I'll fill it with Herefords, because that's how he feeds his family. There's a lesson there too. Lastly, I must share with you, it was mentioned earlier, the greatest gift we gave ourselves in Minnesota was when we, the voters, get this, voted to tax ourselves 3/16 of 1% in sales tax for the Legacy Amendment to go to Fish and Wildlife, Clean Water, Parks and Trails, the arts. This is a 4 cents on a $10 purchase, if you're ever wondering what's coming out of your pocket. But I'm privileged to be on the Lessard-Sams Council. That's 12 people of citizens and legislators who decide how to divvy up the fish and wildlife part of this. And let me just tell you what your 4 cents amounts to just for fish and wildlife, 1/3 of the fund. Tomorrow I'm going to a Lessard-Sams Council meeting where we'll finalize the proposal that we will present to your legislator, and hopefully they'll approve it. But we divvied up $100 million. That's just this year. And I cannot emphasize enough for you, because I heard this before this thing was approved. It's just another deal. The legislators, they'll divert that money, they'll throw it, they'll waste it. We all have heard the stories, and there's plenty of waste in government. I'll be the first to tell you, but I'll just say this. And you're welcome to look. All of the projects are scrutinized by the 12 of us. Everybody, the people are proposing, they have to come in, they're grilled, they have to fill out reports. We can a budget, we can see everything they propose to do, and because of the Constitution protection, we deal in habitat, what happens on the ground, or what happens on the lakeshore, or what happens on the wetland, or protecting rice beds, or improving trout streams. It all goes on the ground. And that, I can't tell you what a great gift we've given ourselves. The sad thing is, $100 million, it's a lot of money. We had 200 million in requests. So there's a lot to do out there. But this is going to go for, 20 more years. Voters could re-up it if they want to. I'd vote yes, but I may not be around to vote. But I want you to know this is just a great thing we've done for ourselves. And last month, the voters in North Dakota had a proposal similar, taking some oil money that's already being siphoned off from the oil companies, already going to the government, but using some of it for natural resources work. That's their proposal. They voted it down 80% to 20%. I'm shocked. I don't know what the hell they're thinking. And farm groups were opposed to it. Why? I don't know. The oil companies were opposed to it. Why? I don't know. They're already paying it. It's not any increase. A bizarre, maybe there's some things the voters know about how the money or where it was going that I don't know. But I'm shocked because, let me tell you what, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, we're all feeling the pressure of expansion of all kinds of things. Intensive agriculture, you name it. And there's no evil people here, but this is the way we're going. And if we don't save some of it, it's going to be gone. In North Dakota, they think they're the land of ducks and open spaces and deer and antelope, etc. Let me tell you, they're losing too. They just don't seem to know it yet. Fortunately, we at least have this gift, and it truly is going and has done remarkable things. And I invite you to check out any of it, because I'll stand with all of it, all the decisions that have been made. And we have arguments, but it's also very non-political, and I like that. You don't protect buffer strips Republican ways or Democrat ways. You do it for clean water and for nesting birds. Anyway, do I sound like a preacher now? Thank you very much. Have I inspired any questions? Yes. Yes. Oh, really? I did not see that. I fished the Amazon for peacock bass and piranhas. They sober you up. Any other questions? Yes. Have I what? Oh, yes. I've had owls fly in when I'm sounding like a hen, maybe looking for an easy meal. Or one time in Florida, early in the morning, I had some barred owls. Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? They went crazy in this tree above me, and it's one of the few critters I recognized because I was walking in the dark and there sounded like some gators over here, which I don't know. They may have been big frogs, but I didn't like it anyway. And they got gobblers going. Gobblers and turkeys, owls and turkeys kind of have a love-hate relationship. So that's a gimmick to get gobblers to gobble, is to sound like a woo, 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 owl. Yes. I don't have. I'm not well read on that. It's been kind of an issue. It's been playing out, and it's difficult to know where to come down on this. But I would say this. From my experience in the Black Hills when they had gold mines, I mean, they had trout streams that died because of South Dakota's regulations that weren't very strict. My own boyhood trout stream in northeast Iowa, that was a garden spot when I was a boy, is a junkyard now. So, you want to err on the side of caution with that, but then you got other people saying, I need a job. It's a tough call. If they can do it and somehow assure that that beautiful part of the state's going to be what it is, then I guess I could live with it. We went out and filmed it in western North Dakota, the frack oil stuff out there. It's unbelievable. And who knows down the road where it's going, except, we sure straightened out the Saudi Arabians for sure, which isn't all bad. We all go to the gas pump. So, but the imprint of the wells is pretty small. When they start drilling, it's a 2-acre deal, and when the well gets going, it's down to 1 acre out there, which is not a lot. Now, the towns and the roads are being struggling because of all the people coming in, and you see oil trucks, water trucks, 24/7. It's boggled my mind. I couldn't believe it, but like I said, we all go to the gas pump. Any other questions? Or yes?
After bringing back the covered swans, why are the Native American Indians allowed to shoot?
That's a good question. I don't know. Don't get me going on our Indian policy, because I say this: if you really want Uncle Sam to take care of you, look at the plight of the American Indian. So I'll just leave it at that. Any other questions? Did you want to go on this turkey hunt real quick? All right, I just happen to have my calls. All right, well, I got to get set up here. Let me tell you this: spring turkey hunting, well, it takes place during their mating season. The gobblers are going around strutting and spreading their tail, and they're dropping their wings, and they're gobbling. They're trying to look pretty for the hens. And the hens pretty much ignore what the hell he's doing. You can see the same thing at any good bar in Minneapolis. Now the hunter gets involved in this by sounding like a hen turkey who would be willing to mate. Let's just get, this is what it is. And so you're trying to imitate the sounds of a hen turkey to fool the gobbler into coming over and a little hanky-panky in the woods. This is kind of an X-rated sport, so. But what you need to know is turkeys roost in trees. And in the springtime, the gobbler usually roosts over here by himself. He's been with the ladies all day, but he kind of separates, and he goes over here. And the hens are over here. They're sitting in the tree. And now you, the turkey hunter, you try to get in as close as you can without being seen. Now turkeys have eyes like eagles, eye on each side of the head, and with a slight movement of their head, they can basically see 365 degrees. And their hearing is very, very good. And their direction is very, very good. When you call and he answers, if you were in a hole in the ground, and if he wanted to find you, I'll guarantee you he'll walk right to that hole and look down. Why is that? Well, let me tell you why. If you're a male bird looking for a female company, you'll damn figure out where in the hell she is. And they've had thousands of years of working on that. Okay, well, let's go on a hunt real quick here. You're in the woods, and there's just a little glow in the eastern sky. And so you listen, and the hen is sitting in that tree, and when she sees that glow, and she says something like this. That's kind of we call it a tree call. I don't know what the turkeys call it, but it's like kind of good morning. We're here, waiting for a little more daylight. Now the gobbler, he's got good ears. He's over there. He hears that. Typical male in the morning, he's very anxious to know there's a lady over here. So some of you got that. Anyway. But he doesn't say anything. He turns on his branch and he looks that way now because that's where the hen was. Now, you have to understand, the way turkeys have this figured out is the hens call, he gobbles, or he just gobbles, they answer, and he waits because they have it, the way they're set up, the hen comes into him. And then he flies down in all his glory. You, as the turkey hunter, are trying to reverse that. So, okay. So he's sitting on the tree over there, looking this way. But it's a little more daylight now, and the hen decides it's time to fly down to eat. And when she does, she says something like this.
Now he hears that. He goes, okay, baby. He gobbles one time to let her know he's over here. She ignores him. She's on the ground feeding, content, everything's fine. She says something like this. He hears that, it goes, one time. Just to remind you, I'm still waiting over here. Well, the hen is she's the matriarch of the whole deal. And when she wants the flock to gather, she says something like this. And here's that, it goes, one time. Still waiting in that damn tree. Well, it is springtime. It is the mating season. And when a hen gets ready to mate, she gets very excited. She goes into certain postures that he recognizes, but he also recognizes her excitement. And she says something like this. Now, he knows exactly what that means. So he goes, three times. Finally, he can't stand it anymore. He spreads his big, beautiful wings. He flies down over here, and you shoot him. It's a great sport. It doesn't happen that way all the time, but you got the idea. Now that keeps you coming back to the woods. Thank you very much. You've been a great audience.
How about one more round of applause for Ron Schara? I don't know if you all noticed, but that last turkey call got the macaws in the back going. So I don't know what that means. So thank you all again for coming out tonight. This series continues to be great. And again, I'll give the props to that legacy amendment that Ron talked about. This is one of many things we're doing here at the zoo that's a result of Minnesotans being very prescient about their future. So thank you all for that. And have a safe drive home, and thanks for coming. Appreciate it.